Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. We're glad you decided to check us out. God has a specific message of hope for your life and mine today. So listen up.
I tell you, last night I had a really good time, and I'm going to date myself, and I'm going to let you know, and you can just make fun of me all you want. I don't care. You know, I don't care. I had one of my dream concerts I was able to go to last night. My wife got me tickets for my birthday, and I went to see Toto at the King Center. All the people who are clapping are people who are old like me, and the young people are like, Toto, isn't that like a dog in The Wizard of Oz or something like that? Dude, I'm telling you, this is one of the best bands you'll ever see, and I was actually happy. I had faith in the youth of America because I saw young people at this concert. I think their parents drug them there to hear some good music finally. But man, my wife has been indoctrinated into Toto by me as much as I can. She's resisted, kicking and screaming the whole way, but she enjoyed it because they're good musicians, and I think they're interesting. They are, I don't know, just to familiarize yourself a little bit with them, they are actually a really weird band because they started playing together when they were like 14 years old. And they are old, dude. I mean, they're like, in the 60s now, or whatever. Now you're going 60 and I'm not old and now you want to throw stuff at me. It's okay. But for a band, you're talking about 50 years of playing and touring together and still going. That doesn't happen very often because if artists and musicians, and be a little bit emotional, and everybody gets their feelings hurt, and then somebody has to leave. Just see Van Halen, David Lee Roth, for all you older people that, like me. So anyway, all right. But at this concert last night, I just got to tell you, I was just so into it, and I wanted to share it with the world, and so I did something that you probably don't need to do at a concert. I went Facebook Live. They're playing Rosanna. What are you going to do? I just want to share that with the world. And so I'm Facebook Live-ing it and everything, and I made a technical mistake. I'm a technical guy, but I made a technical mistake. See, I thought in my mind in that moment of just, man, it's Toto, and it's Rosanna, and we're all singing. I'm going Facebook Live. I forgot the mic is pointing back at me. And I'm just going at it. I can see your face when it's shining through the window on the other side. I'm just going at it, And so it is like Toto backing me up. Which was awesome until it got to the high parts, because I'm still a little bit sick, and I'm still rolling and stuff, and it sounded like some kind of drunken sailor being beat with a stick. I don't know what was going on. Rosanna! It was bad. You ever heard that MP3 that's going around about that dude it's been going around for like 15 years, about this dude singing Oh Holy Night, and it's so terrible? It's every mistake you've ever heard with somebody trying to put out Oh Holy Night. Dude, that was me I murdered Africa. I just dropped an H-bomb on Africa. I bless the rains down and out. It was terrible. It was terrible. Now, see, here's the thing. If I want to tell you now, if you hear that now, you're probably going to go out and look on my Facebook to see if you can find it. You can't because I hid it. Ain't nobody else going to see that. Because I can't sing a little bit. And this would be the time to tell you, I am singing in the trio at First Baptist for the Christmas program this year. So, I got something going on. But if I played that, and then I told you I'm singing at First Baptist in the Christmas trio, you would tell all your friends, don't go to that. I heard that guy. If he's one of the soloists, it's bad. Because, see, those things, they aren't in focus together. My voice last night, if you listen to it, you would say, recalibrate? Oh, yes, Jim, you need to recalibrate that or just turn it off and don't turn it back on again. We've been going through this series about recalibration, and one of the things that we talk about, these 6 areas that we've been dealing with, is if it's just a little bit off, like me on Rosanna last night, just about a half a step off on some of that stuff, you can ruin the whole thing. And the truth is, in these 6 areas of your life that we've been dealing with over the past 6 weeks, well, I guess 8 weeks now, the things that we had to put a couple things in, what we've been dealing with are in these areas of your life as a Christian If the dial's just a little bit off, it starts bleeding over into everything else and messing it up. And what is a beautiful song turns into Blessing the Rains Down in Africa that I was doing last night, And so we've been going through these areas. If you remember, we've talked about your input. It's important about your input. Before you make decisions, you need to have something to base your decisions on. That comes from listening to God's word and taking God's word in a proactive sense. Not just when it's time for you to make a decision, I'm going to run find the Bible and put my finger down on a verse. No, that's daily intake of God's word and training yourself to make your decisions based on God's words, not just your feelings, which are tainted by sin. And we talked about how that's important, that seeking there. We talked about the L word the second week, love. How we are to love and value everyone. To everybody that you see, I don't care how mean they are. I don't care how good looking they are. I don't care how annoying they are. You ever think about that? An annoying person. Everybody's made in God's image. Even that annoying person. And I thought, does that mean that in somewhere God is annoying? I mean, I'm not going to get into that. I don't even know. That's just too theological for me to go to. But one thing I do know is I'm supposed to act in love toward other people. And I don't do it because of who they are. I do it because I love God so much. To love God, to love people well, you have to love God more. And the reason that I love others is because I love God out of respect and love for God, who doesn't change and who isn't annoying. I was joking. But, all of this, to love Him well, I have to love people. And to love people well, I can't make my relationship based on what I get back from them. I love them because God loves me and I love God, so I love others in honor to Him. And that way it makes your relationship stronger because you're not basing your love on how well someone responds to your expectations. In other words, like if I say something to somebody and they say something ugly back to me. Say I said something to Steve. He would never do this, so that's why I'm picking on him. I said something to Steve, and Steve was makes fun of me. Like he goes and finds that video and then plays it on the radio or somewhere like that, and then won't take it down. And he's commentating, oh, this is a terrible singer. If he were to do that, it would be hard to love Steve. I won't go beat Steve up because Steve's doing all that stuff. But out of my love for God, if I love God, even if Steve did that to me, I'm to love Steve. I'm to act in love for Steve, not because of what Steve does, but because of what God does and my respect for Him. And that's for all of us. We talked about worshiping, the gathering together, that we gather and to value this gathering because this is the place where you develop community and whether you have people that are walking beside you. This is where you get strengthened to go throughout the day, and not just here, but in our life groups, in our small groups, where you come in and you communicate, and people communicate, and they see your story, and they see your life, and they help you. And one of the things that is great about our life groups are where a lot of our care happens in our church. One of the reasons we value that gathering together is because in our life groups, when something goes wrong in your life, it's your life group that comes beside you and helps you. It's your life group that walks through life with you. It's that close-knit group that we have. We have some great life group leaders and some great life groups here. I can't recommend those enough to have some sort of group that you're together and everybody is trying to push toward Jesus. Most of us are failing at times, but hopefully when we're failing, somebody else is succeeding and they're helping us along. And we kind of trade that off. We also talked about not just that, but we talked about our relational focus, and how we need to be figuring out why we have relationships. Relationships are important. We're all made to have them. We learn through relationship. We grow through relationship. We don't grow in isolation. We grow through relationship. The most important relationship is one with God, but the second most important relationship, and everything is on that area, is our relationships with people. And a lot of times, we are not ready when the relationship hits us because we don't understand why we have a relationship. And the reason we have relationships is so that we can point people to Christ and we can get closer to Christ as well. It's not because they're funny and they can say something nice back to us and pump our ego. That's not what it's for. It's not because they have possession, or they have power in our job, and if we're friends with them, they can get us a better job. That's not what it's about. It's not about those things. It's not because that person's really fun and we just want to hang out with them. The reason we have relationships is to help people get closer to Christ and help us to get closer to Him as well. And if we don't start our relationships with that foundation, we'll make changes or we'll make decisions on how we progress through a relationship that doesn't match the purpose and things can get out of whack. You know, Bruce talked about being blessed to be a blessing a few weeks ago. You know, a lot of, and how we're given things, our money, our time, our talent, and a lot of those are not given for us to use for our benefit. There is a lot of that was given to give out to others, to bless others in the name of God. A lot of times I look at that as output versus throughput. A lot of times we think when we give or we serve, it comes out of, it's our output. We got to generate this stuff and it's an output. But no, that's not what happens. What happens is God gives us stuff, and he is channeling blessing to other people through our lives and through the things that he's given us. And we get to be a part of that blessing to help someone be better, to help someone by meeting their need. But we don't do that out of our own stuff. We do that because God supplies it. And when this is working correctly, when this coming from God out to others is working correctly, there's an endless supply of things to give, an endless supply of blessing to give. But what happens is when we cap it off, God gives it, and we cap it off, or we squeeze it off, or we divert it off in our own little side room over here that's our stuff, and we start capping the flow out, that's where we start having problems in our own stuff. And we don't think, and it's funny, when people cap that off and they pull it off to the side and they're just sending a trickle out to other people, they think, oh, I'm all of a sudden I'm overwhelmed and I'm burnt out, and therefore I got to stop doing the little trickle because that's what, and they don't that's what's messing me up. And they don't realize that's what got them in that way in the first place. You know, we're blessed to be a blessing. You know, we talked about so many things over these last few weeks. And today we're going to talk about something I call projection. I call it projection. What projection is about, it's all about what you communicate to those around you. You know, what does that mean? What are you projecting daily? You know, when someone looks at your life, what do they see? What's their thought? When they see you and they know you and your interaction with them, what's the first thing that comes to their mind? You know, if we are to do this on mission with Christ, you know, what are we to do? You know, do we just talk? You know, we talk about being on mission for Jesus. Are we just supposed to talk about Jesus every day? Because a lot of times people say, "Well, I would like for someone to think about Jesus." You know, I've said this often. You know, it doesn't really matter at the end of my life what you think about me. It matters at the end of my life what you think about Jesus by the way I've lived it. Okay, and that's important for every one of us. That's not just a pastor thing. That's an everybody thing. That's an every Christ follower thing. But what do? We just talk about Jesus all day long? You know, communication sometimes is difficult. I mean, you realize there's over 6,000 languages in the world? And I don't know if I can talk about Jesus enough in that many languages, even with Google Translate, because I don't even know if Google Translate has them all. You know, but it's difficult to communicate. The truth is that even when we know someone's language, let's say you knew someone's language, they had another language, and you can talk about Jesus in their language. There's even more things to go on. There's culture. There's age. And I can say, hold the line, and some of you know where I was last night. Some of you have no idea whatsoever. That's age. That's a culture. That's a way of speaking. There's experience that you have to communicate in so many deep levels with people. It's not easy just enough to say the words. Try to communicate with a teenager sometimes. I can't keep up with the language. Just when I think something's cool, I say it, and they go, "Oh, Dad, never say that again." Okay, you know, that's kind of how it works. And that's normal. That's what I'm finding out. It may be not normal, but it's your average with me. But that's what goes on. And so it can be difficult to communicate. My dad and I, it was hard for us to communicate. We're 50 years apart. My dad was born in 22. I was born in 68. You know, he was part of the Great Depression, and I was the me generation of the 80s when I was a teenager. Woo, you want to talk about some not understanding each other moments. There was a lot of those, you know. It was magnified because I'm all about me and excess, and my dad's all about, you know, we're going to wear those shoes until they fall off your feet. You know, that's kind of how it works. But see, it's a different thing. And first, I want to take you to the Bible in 1 Corinthians, you know, and we'll be dealing in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 is where we're going to be. So if you turn your Bible there, if you want to check out your smart device and jump on your Bible icon, that's fine. If you got your little brown Bible, the YouVersion Bible, you can jump into events and click on that and type Bay West Church, and you'll even see my notes, and you can follow along right here. But we're going to jump into here. And I do need to say something. Hey, there's somebody watching on Facebook named Samantha. I have emailed you back, but it's not gotten to you. I talked with Steve about it this morning, but I am getting your emails. So she watches this on Facebook. And I've emailed her back a couple of times, and Steve told me it didn't get to her, but now I got you. I got you. So, you know, Steve show you, but check your spam folder. But it's coming back. So anyway, and if you're out there listening on Facebook and you want to email in, you want to hit me on a tweet, man, I'll get you back. No worries. I'm there, but you got to check your spam folder because for some reason mine go there. Anyway, all right, I don't care if you got your paper Bible, pull it out, 2 Corinthians 2, unroll your scroll, I don't care what it is, go with it. Just as long as you read it, we'll have it on the screens as well. But we're going to jump into chapter 2. And I want to let you know something about 1 Corinthians. All right, this book in the Bible that Paul wrote is kind of known as the problem epistle. Why is it known as the problem epistle? Has it got a bunch of grammar mistakes? No, that's not what's up. Because every time you turn around in there, Paul's dealing with all these problems in Corinth. Because they were kind of a messed up church. If you're in a messed up church, there you go. Corinth is a good place for you to look at because they were messed up and they still made it. There is hope. If you're in a messed up church, but it's a problem epistle because you look all the way through it. If you're reading, all of a sudden you hear this all over the time. You see these words, now concerning, and he goes off and fixes a problem. And he'll go, and now concerning, da-da-da-da. And now concerning, and just all the way through the book, there's all these problems, this problem and that problem, over and over and over, because the church at Corinth had a lot of problems. They had issues, serious issues. If you want to go read in 1 Corinthians, read through that book, and you'll see a gamut of wacko stuff in there that they were, you're going, that was going on. You got to stop yourself for a minute. A lot of times we just read through the Bible and process through really fast. When you read through 1 Corinthians, you need to stop for a second every time you read something that's weird and go, wait a minute. That wasn't happening out in the world. That was happening in the church. We're having to fix that. And you see the depth of what God is saving people from. It brings meat and it makes this 2D words on a page, this one-dimensional words on a page, to a 2D situation, a 3D situation. We really feel what's going on in Corinth, okay? But they messed up on a lot of stuff, and God had done a lot of work in their lives, and even though they were still a mess in progress, Paul spent the book trying to fix some things that they didn't get. And here's how Paul approached them. I thought this was really good. How did he get across what was necessary? They're really, let's be straight, they're thick skulls. How did he get across it? I'm a thick skull guy. I mean, God speaks to me, but how did Paul get that across to the people in Corinth? He talked about it in chapter 2, and this is what he said. He said, and so it was with me, brothers and sisters, when I came to you, I did not come with eloquence or human wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. Now I want you to look, the first thing Paul starts out with, he tells us what not to communicate. When you're projecting, when you're communicating to others, here's the first thing you don't need to worry about. Don't worry about coming to somebody with some great eloquence or this awesome human wisdom or something. I didn't come to you like that. In churches, sometimes people gravitate toward the best speaker, or there's somebody who can tell the best story, or they can make you laugh the best, or they're entertaining. And I'm not saying that any of those things are bad, but what I am saying is you don't need to make that the determiner of who you listen to in your life, okay? You need to make what you listen to in your life needs to be about the people that point you toward Christ. It's not about the $10 words that no one else can understand. Paul, and what you have to understand is when you read this verse, you need to understand the story behind Paul. Paul was one of the brightest intellectual minds of his day. And you know the story of Paul. Those of you who've been around church much, if you hadn't, I'll fill you in on it. Paul was actually a Pharisee, and he was one of the brightest Pharisees. He was raising up through the ranks. He was very intelligent. They were looking at him as the next leader in the Pharisees and stuff like that. So you're looking at that. He's looking at Paul, looking from Paul, and he's saying, look, I didn't come to you with a lot of eloquence, although he could have. I didn't come to you with all this awesome knowledge and cool sayings from my own brain. Paul could have, but he was smart enough to know that all his wisdom and big talk really didn't amount to much if it didn't communicate to somebody else. See, sometimes people just might think that if you say something in a cool way and you've got a really great wise saying, or you got this great soundbite, that's the thing about Twitter, you can make something so vague that sounds so cool on Twitter, and people just think you're so smart because you put out, not me, I never get any of those cool things, but I read them on Twitter, and it's really short, and you say something and it's like, oh, but that's just so right, and it's really vague, and it's cute. But you can fake wisdom in that way, but it's not backed by substance. You've got to see, as a pastor, a lot of times it's cool the few times you run up on something that sounds really good. But Paul was saying that these things weren't what he brought in his bag to get the job done. It wasn't the cool saying. It wasn't the rhyming thing. It wasn't, the funny story. He said, look, I didn't come with all that stuff. It's not how you preach. It's not a biography lesson. It's not an intellectual exercise, and you can't treat it as such. And in verse 2, he continues on. He said, for I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. The truth about God's love is what he centered on. And it's not just that God loved us, it's also that we don't deserve it. How many people do you know that are spending their life trying to put up a front to let you and everybody else know about how cool they are and how they deserve the things around them, how they're trying to impress you? Do you know people like that? I was trying to tell you something cool and indirectly about themselves to impress you. You ever feel that? That's someone who hasn't figured out it's okay to not be impressive. You know that? Jesus is impressive enough for all of us. So I don't have to do that. I mean, there's sometimes in my selfish nature I might try, but I have to remind myself of the truth. That's not my job. Paul was saying, look, I'm not worried about anything except knowing Jesus and him crucified. It's an incredible focus that Paul said. Look, I'm not going to worry about everything else. I'm not going to worry about, the stock market or the Jewish stock market or whatever it was. I'm not going to worry about the Roman government. I'm not going to worry about this. I'm not going to worry about that. When I'm with these guys, when it gets tough and problems get big, what I do is I don't expand my focus to all these extra things. I narrow my focus to what? To Jesus and him crucified. I'm not worried about the $10 words I'm going to tell you. I'm just going to tell you that God loves you, that you're not perfect and you need him and you know that, and Jesus knows that. He loves you anyway so much that he died on a cross for you and I so that we could be reconnected to God and through that begin to grow into the people that God meant for us to be. And to have peace in that, to understand that what you need and what you don't need in this world. He said, I'm zeroing in. It's all about Jesus and him crucified. All over 1 Corinthians, Paul's talking about what Christ sent him to do. Verse 17, verse 23, verse 21, he says, I'm here to preach Christ. And I'm going to tell you something, just so you know, the magic secret about every sermon, okay? If you don't already know this, the magic secret about every sermon that you will ever hear is this. Here it is in a nutshell. Give your life to Jesus, and it'll work out. It should all come back down to that somewhere. Now, there may be some nice wisdom and some things because the Bible has a lot of things to say about how you live your life and a lot of practical wisdom about how you do this and how you interact in this situation and what you do in that situation. But every one of those things are built on the foundation of this. You must give your life to Christ and trust him for any of that to work. Because if you don't, all of this up here that sounds really cool will have a cap in its effectiveness, because at some point you're going to run into the point that that's not going to carry on further because you don't love Jesus and haven't put him first in your life. That is the thing about every sermon. And I'm going to tell you, every sermon, every joke, every funny thing, every theological treatise that you listen to, whatever it is that you listen from any pastor, and me too, if it doesn't bring you back around to the fact that you need Jesus, that's really where it all starts. And I need Jesus, you need Jesus. That's where it all gets back around to. If it doesn't take you back to that place, you need to change or the venue of what you're listening. Maybe I'm not saying I'm going to change the venue. Maybe you need to go up to somebody and say, hey, you know what? You've been preaching a lot about this, but I'm not hearing a lot about Jesus. Because you should be hearing about Jesus. It should be pointing you back around to that. If you ever hear me doing that, I want you to come to me and tell me, say, look, Jim, I've heard you preach for a really long time, and there's a drought. I'm not hearing a lot about Jesus. Because you should. Now, we may talk about a specific subject, but I'm going to promise you, what I'm trying to do, my intent is, even though I'm talking about specific things, is to bring you back around to all of the things that I told you don't work if you're not following Jesus. You haven't given your life to Jesus. And continuing on verse 3, Paul said, I came to you in weakness with great fear and trembling. Now, I think I want to camp here just a second. I think this is funny for most of us in our culture. Weakness, fear, and trembling, doesn't necessarily buy a lot of credibility. I mean, you look on social media and the people that do really well on their, on their marketing things and stuff like that, they present this air of confidence, this transparent confidence. And they talk in a way that makes you inspire trust in them. This doesn't play as much in our culture, but Paul said, look, I want you to know the depth of what he said. I'm concentrating on Jesus and him crucified. It's not about my strength. It's not about what I know. It's not about my courage. It's not about how well and stable I am. Do you think about that? A lot of us think, here's the deal. He's saying in fear and trembling. Paul was aware of the sinful condition of his heart and what God had to do had to save him from and where he came from. I mean, this was a guy who participated in killing Christians, and then Jesus called him to come follow him and help build up Christians. And Jesus took that Christian murderer and turned him into someone who wrote most of the New Testament. And through Paul, God gave us most of the theology with which we deal with in the New Testament. Very prolific writer. It's amazing, the redemption story of Paul. Paul was acutely aware of how far he had to go. Now, you and I, this is what you and I do. We are acutely aware of how far we have to go, but we use that as the reason that we do not speak about Jesus, because we're afraid somebody's going to call us a hypocrite. And a lot of times that's because we've been trying to present an image over here that looks all like we've got everything together, and we don't let people on the inside to see how bad things really are. Why don't you just start here? Talk about how bad things really are. Talk about how things have gotten better and how you're following Jesus. You're still not there yet, and you still make mistakes. And be very open with that and transparent. Paul's story was out there for everybody. Everybody knew that he was the guy. In fact, in the early stages of his ministry, he would go places, and people would be afraid to talk to him. He'd be like, is this a trick? Is this like the Trojan horse? Or I didn't know that back then. But, is this a trick? Is this Paul trying to set us up? He's going to have us come meet him, and then all these Pharisees are going to jump out of the closet and stone us to death or something like that. They didn't know. I mean, his story was out there. Is your story out there? Are you hiding a story that you think I've got to hide or no one will like me? Or no one will listen to me about Jesus? That's a lie. You don't have to hide anything. When you explain how bad it is, that creates the tension for how good God is and what he's doing for you. You understand that? When you cap off how bad it is to right here, it looks like, you don't really need God that much. But when you show how bad it is, you can see. And Paul was all about that. He was the chiefest of sinners, he called himself, and he was right. We all are. But not only that, he goes to verse 4. He said, I came to you with weakness and trembling. He says, my message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power. What he was saying is, look, I didn't come to you with a big bunch of words. I didn't tell you with a bunch of jokes, and I didn't have this slick presentation. What I showed you was what God had done in the lives of people. And one of the places that Paul started was with himself. It's like I said, I was a murderer. I murdered Christians. If there's anyone that God should have struck dead and got rid of, it should have been me. But he called me out, and he changed my heart, and now I work. I take beatings. Paul, they have beaten Paul in a town. There's stories of him being beaten in a town, taken outside of the town, and left for dead, unconscious. And he wakes up. And what does he do? He goes back into the town to preach again. I don't know if I've got that kind of fortitude. I'm going to tell you what, if I stood up here and I preached the gospel and all y'all got up and beat me up and threw me out there, if I woke up after y'all left, I would probably try to pretend I was asleep until you left. And then when y'all left, I might just get up and drive home. I don't know if I would roll back in here and do it, but this is the inspiration that what God had done. That was the story, the demonstration of the Spirit's power in a life. About what God can change. I want you to think about the worst person you possibly know. Someone you think they would never follow Jesus ever in a million years. There's no good that can come from that person. And I'm going to tell you that God can change their life, and not only change their life back to even can make them a leader that can change the life, that he will use to change the lives of other people. We see it all over the place, time and time again. And it is inspiring and amazing. And that's what Paul is saying. Look, here's the crux of the issue. It's not about how well you speak. You know, it's not about how much you know. When the gospel is communicated and accepted, it is always a demonstration of the Spirit's power in someone's life. You can't present a good enough sales pitch for somebody to follow Jesus. God does that with His Spirit in someone else's life, and He changes who they are. And He makes that sullen, non-communicative husband who won't come to church and won't do anything. He changes that life, and all of a sudden, this man is a spiritual leader. I think about a couple of mine, that someone was my assistant for a long time, and she married a man, and he was sullen and angry and wouldn't come to church. He'd been hurt and all those things. And I think about where he is right now, and it was pain in the beginning. But I think about where he is right now. He sings on the praise team. He's involved in a life group. His countenance has changed. He talks different. He looks different. When I shake his hand, he's still the same strong man, but my goodness, he's just different. And God has changed his heart and changed his life. And it can be that way for you. And it can be that way for you out there on Facebook Live too. If you're listening today, you are not too far away. And if you think that, you're lying to yourself. And if somebody told you that, they're lying to you. Don't listen to them. Because God can change your heart. That's the truth. Through Jesus and His crucifixion, God can come into your heart and make you everything He's meant for you to be. And make you proud of the legacy you leave. That is outstanding for anyone. I want to tell you, but the thing about it is, with the gospel, when it's communicated and accepted, it's always, like I said, done with a demonstration of God's power. But also, when the gospel is communicated, when it's done through that demonstration, the demonstration has to be there. You know, my dad was, like I said earlier, my dad was 50 years older than me. You know, Depression, 80s, you know. Barely got shoes, got to have 10 pair of shoes because they got to match the pastel-colored jacket you were wearing because you watched Miami Vice. I didn't do that, really. Sort of, maybe. Every now and then. Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, difference. It was hard for us to talk. It really was. My dad was a man of few words. I was a kid of hyperbole in many words. And so Dad and I, we had a lot of moments. We loved each other, but it was hard to get it across. It was hard for my dad to show me how to do things when we were working together, to tell me how to do it. And he would also always say this. I can't remember how many times he said this. Look, he would finally say, look, stop. He said, just watch me. I can show you better than I can tell you. And he would show me how to do something. See, he understood an extremely important principle that we all understand. It's not just what you say, it's how you do. Why don't we play testimony videos at times? Why is it important to be in a life group and hear what's going on in somebody else's life? It's important because you need to hear what they're going through, because sometimes what they're going through is very similar to what you're going through or about to go through. And you need to see the pitfalls and mistakes, and you need to see the victories and the successes in what happened in that life. And God will speak to you through His Word and call that up to you and give you an example to follow in the middle of that. That's why it's so important to be in the gathering of church. That's why we need to have this together. A lot of times, some people get the attitude that I only come to church when I serve because I have to be doing something to be valuable. That is false. It's a lie from the pit of hell. Service is important, just as important as your quiet time, but it's important for you to be here with nothing else to do except to be part of the body of Christ, because somebody is going to shake your hand and say, what's going on? And you're going to tell them, and they're going to think about that in 2 weeks when they're going through the same thing, and they're going to listen to what you said, or they're going to watch what you didn't do, and God's going to speak to them through that, and their life is going to change by their interaction with you. And every time you're not here, you rob somebody of that, because God does not stop working in your life. He does not stop creating the story and the song and the picture for you to share. And He means for you to share it. Because here's the truth. Don't you remember this? Communication is validated through demonstration. I can say all that I want, but until you see me follow up with that, it means a whole lot more. That's where you get the thing across. Demonstration is powerful. It's not just what you say, it's what you do. Demonstration translates across culture, across age barriers, across political ideologies. You know, the reason Paul in Romans 8, 10 through 12, he tells us that the same power that raised Christ from the dead lives in us. And we just don't have the luxury, but we have the obligation to God to let the world know what the Spirit is doing in us, because there is nothing more powerful than a demonstration of a life that has been changed. It's important. You lost the copyright to your story when you signed on to follow Jesus. And that meant all the details of it. Because God says, I want people to see how far you have come so they can see how great I am and what I can do in their lives with the things that they're afraid to share. No big words, no amazing degrees, no doctorates. It's allowing God to demonstrate his power through you. You know, when James tells us in chapter 1 of his book, he said, look, we are not just to hear or speak, but we're to do what the word says. And those who continue in that, who continue to let God write his story through their existence, just making that movie after movie after movie about what he can do in the people that follow him. When we do that, God blesses that. That's why James says, look, that when we continue to follow him, we are blessed in what we do. It's important. And I say that because it's important for our mission in Palm Bay. It can't just be, let me tell you what the gospel is and let me hide my life from you. It can't be that. They have to see it demonstrated. Last night I'm listening to, I'm at Toto, and they had this part where they all came down and sat on instruments, and they've written so many songs. I mean, not just for their group, but for other groups and other artists as well. And there was one of the keyboard players, Sipa Coro, was sharing about a song that he wrote, and it ended up on Michael Jackson's Thriller album. You know, it's a song called Human Nature. And he said, this is where the song came from. And if you listen to the song, you probably wouldn't get this. But he said, I was on my way to the studio. We had one more cut to do in they're working on Africa, is what they were working on, and the Rains Down in Africa in that album. And so I stopped off. It was right after school. I stopped off to see my daughter because I knew I would be up till late at night, and I wouldn't see her that night. So I stopped to see her after school. And said she'd had a really, really rough day at school. And what had happened was she fell off the slide, and this little boy had hit her. And she was just going, why, Daddy? Why? Why do you do that? And he said, I listened to the details, and I figured out, probably the little boy has a crush on her, and he doesn't know how to express that. And he said, he really likes you. He just didn't know how to tell you that. That's probably why he hit you. He didn't know how to express those feelings. He said, she wasn't buying it, at all. But see, so he left and he went to the studio, and he said while they were setting up, he went out in the one of the other rooms that had a piano and sat down and wrote the chorus to Human Nature. And the chorus goes like this. I'm not going to sing it, so don't even think that. It says, why, tell them that it's human nature. Why do they do me this way? Why, tell them that it's human nature. I don't like living this way. I don't like loving this way. Now, you sing that song now, you listen to Michael Jackson sing it, and the verses are written, and it has a different connotation. But when you hear the story behind it, I mean, we've all either been in that situation, we've observed that situation on the playground as kids, or we've come home to our parents with that, or we've had to talk to our kids about that, either to our sons about don't do it that way, they don't get that, that's not right, or to our daughters, or to our sons, and we're picking on him, and all kinds of things. We identify with that situation. We get it. And that's what happens when we allow our story to be told. When you see the events that created that song, the meaning of the song communicates so much more. And when people not only hear your song performed in front of them through your lyrics and your mouth, but they hear the explanation that your life gives as to why that song was written that way, the what that was behind it. It means so much more. I mean, what would happen? Just imagine this. Let's go with me here. The church in Corinth was a really wacky town, right? I read about that and I think, well, that's a lot like Palm Bay. A lot of wackiness going on in Palm Bay. a lot of weird stuff. It's not easy problems. The people in our city don't have easy problems. I mean, you could say that about anywhere. But I mean, when we look at the statistics that I've quoted over and over about Palm Bay, where we rank nationally per capita in divorce and home foreclosure and heavy alcohol abuse. I mean, where we rank so high in those, these are interconnected, complicated issues. They're not easy. They're much like Corinth. There's a lot of stuff going on. Imagine if we grasp that and we realize that this place really needs Jesus. I appreciate AA and I appreciate programs like that, and they have their place. But I'm going to tell you, at the foundation of conquering alcohol abuse, there's Jesus at the bottom of that conquers it for good. And so many of these things and problems that we have, the foundation starts with a foundation built on Christ. And if it doesn't start there, it's a house of cards that's tinker toys that are waiting to fall over. And see, this is where it has to begin, with Christ in the foundation. And Palm Bay needs to see that. They need to hear us speak the gospel, but just as important, they need to see a demonstration of God's power in the lives of people. They need to see it up close and real. Everything that we do communicates something: our preferences, our hang-ups, our truth, our perspective. So our goal should be that we are to communicate Christ in everything that we do, in every action, in every facet of our lives. When I say I talk about parenting, when I talk about marriage, when I talk about how to handle your finances, when I talk about all of those things, at the bottom of every one of those, it's built on a foundation of, if you give your life to Christ and you trust Him with everything you have, He provides so many things out of that relationship that it will obliterate the problems that you have in that over time. Or He will give you strength to last through it that creates so much example for someone else that they are inspired by what you're dealing with and seeing how God is helping you to grow through that and what you are becoming in the center of it. That it's worth it. It changes people's lives. It's a demonstration of God's power. In every action, every facet of your life, we have an obligation to communicate Christ. And Palm Bay needs to see people who are committed to putting Christ first in their life, that live a transparent story in front of them and share the reasons behind that story to bring the struggle that we can all identify with. So the question you're saying is probably this: how do we live a life that communicates Christ? It's pretty simple. And we were joking at the staff meeting this week. We were actually joking to worship team, is that this series, Recalibrate, has been all about our core values here at Bay West. Some people hadn't even got that, and I was trying to repackage it because I didn't want to go, hey, we're going to talk about our core values again, and we go, oh, no, here we go, we talked about that again, and then not come. So I repackaged it differently. But we've been talking about the very same concepts of what we do. During this series, we've been talking about dealing with the core values. It's on our website called The Six. You can read that. Let me show you a little bit about our mission here is to make disciples here and everywhere for the glory of God, right? That's our mission. And Bruce talked about it, the welcome. That's the mission. When we talk about the mission, we talked about back in September, the mission is the big reason you are here. As a church, that's our big reason for being here. Everything we do is directed to that. The vision is how you do that. And when we talk about recalibrating these core values that we have, these are all the ways these are the vision for how you accomplish the mission. Let's take a look. First, you've got seek God faithfully through His word and prayer. That's input that we talked about the first week. Secondly, you've got to tentatively love and value all people. That's the L word that we talked about in the second week of the series. You've got eagerly participate honestly in worship. That means honestly coming together as a group in the gathering and valuing that. Not just for what can be done, but the fact that you are here and your presence makes a difference. But also cultivate relationships with God's purposes in mind. That's understanding why we have relationships to begin with and starting them out right and making wise decisions and how we grow and cultivate them so they don't turn into a mess. Give and serve generously. Realizing that God has given us things. There's things in your bank account. There's things that you can do. There's energy that you have that have nothing to do with accomplishing something for you and your family. It's meant for somebody outside there. And that's why God gave it to you. And the longer you hold on to it, the longer you're messing up and you're causing You're causing irritation with him because he has a reason he gave it to you. That throughput versus my output. And also today, when we talk about projection, that's just live a life that communicates Christ. As you look at those areas, I'm going to tell you, if you're experiencing spiritual problems in your area, if there's something that is just kicking your butt, it's going to come down to one of those things. Either you haven't given your life to Christ, or you're not seeking God in that with faithfully through His Word and His prayer. Through His Word and prayer, you're maybe looking at something and there's a problem in your life and God said to do it one way, and you're saying, I just don't really think, I'll just like kind of do it sort of this way. And we'll just like ignore that. That may be where the problem is starting. Maybe you don't love people. Maybe you don't value someone that you're dealing with in a proper way. Maybe they irritate you and you're basing your love for them on what they give you back, not on what God has given you. You eagerly participate honestly in worship. Maybe you don't. The value is not here for the gathering. And not only are you coming in and you're not, and people are missing out on what you have to bring in your life, in the life group, in the worship gathering, but also you're missing out on things that God's trying to tell you through everybody else right here. That's the flip side of that coin. Maybe you don't cultivate relationships with God's purposes in mind. Maybe that's why yours are a mess right now. And everybody always hurts your feelings, and you're always mad, and you're always cutting somebody off, and everything like that. And you're always like, well, they just hurt me. I'm just quitting, moving on. Maybe God's trying to say, look, you haven't figured out why I gave you that relationship. It really wasn't about you. It's about you loving me by loving them. Not about you loving them so you get something back. Give and serve generously. Maybe you're holding on to things you need to let go. And maybe you haven't accepted that your whole purpose of your life, like Paul says, Christ and Him crucified, I centered it down to this. Maybe you haven't accepted that that's the whole goal of your life. That's to be the legacy that you leave. It's not the job. It's not the kids. It's not how well they were educated or how well they played ball or, if they went, what they went to the right college or they got the right job or they had the great grandkids or they all come back on Thanksgiving and they like to be there. I tell you, if you put all this stuff in place, you're going to find a lot of that coming back. And the earlier, the better in your life. See, this is the recalibration that we need to have because God has given it a mission to reach this city for Palm Bay. And you may laugh when you say that, or you may just pass by that, but I really, literally do mean that God has given us that mission to reach this entire 110,000 population city. We are part of a body of Christ that's bigger than this meeting, but we have a job to fulfill in doing it. And by goodness, we're going to do it while we're here. And I want you to get on board with that mission because that is how your life begins to shine. When you recalibrate it and you put it back to the standard. Let's pray.
Thanks for being a part of Bay West today. Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. Please feel free to check us out at baywestchurch.org, or you can follow us on Facebook at Bay West Church.